You are nothing to me." The words echoed through the grand hall, silencing hundreds of voices mid-celebration. Alara felt her knees weaken, felt the silver tray in her hands begin to tremble as every eye in the room turned toward her. She had not asked for this. She had not asked for the mate bond to ignite in the middle of the Alpha King's welcome banquet, had not asked for her eyes to glow golden at the exact moment his did, broadcasting to every wolf present what should have been a private, sacred moment. But the moon goddess did not ask permission, and now Alara stood frozen in the center of the marble floor, wearing her kitchen servant's uniform, while King Matthias Blackthorn stared at her with an expression that held no warmth, no recognition of the invisible thread now connecting their souls. "Your Majesty, I did not mean to," Alara began, but her voice cracked. The tray slipped from her fingers, crystal glasses shattering against the floor in an explosion of sound that made her flinch. Lady Vivienne de Goldcrest, resplendent in crimson silk and dripping with rubies, stepped closer to the king, her hand possessively curling around his arm. Her smile was razor-sharp, her green eyes glittering with triumph as she surveyed Alara from head to toe, taking in the plain gray dress, the flower still dusting one sleeve, the calluses on hands that had scrubbed floors and peeled potatoes since childhood. "How unfortunate," Vivienne purred, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "It seems the moon goddess has a cruel sense of humor, pairing our king with this." She said the last word as if it tasted foul. Matthias did not pull away from Vivienne's touch. He stood there, tall and imposing in his ceremonial armor, his dark hair still bearing traces of road dust from his journey, his gray eyes like winter storms as they fixed on Alara. She could feel it, the bond pulling at her chest, urging her toward him, whispering that this man was hers, that they were meant to be. But his next words shattered that whisper into 1,000 pieces. "I am bound by treaty and honor to Lady Vivienne," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "The Goldcrest alliance is essential to our kingdom's stability. What the moon goddess may have intended is irrelevant compared to the needs of my people." He paused, and something flickered across his face, something that might have been pain, but it vanished so quickly, Alara thought she had imagined it. Matthias Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, reject you as my mate." The formal rejection hit Alara like a physical blow. She gasped, her hand flying to her chest where the bond had been glowing warm and golden just moments before. Now it felt like someone had driven a blade of ice directly into her heart. The pain was indescribable, radiating outward in waves that made her vision blur and her legs buckle. She would have fallen if someone had not caught her elbow. It was Marcus, the head steward, his weathered face creased with pity as he steadied her. "Come, child," he whispered urgently. "Get out of here. Now." But Alara could not move. She stared at Matthias, searching his face for any sign of the agony she was experiencing, for any indication that rejecting his true mate cost him even a fraction of what it was costing her. His expression remained stone, unreadable, though she noticed his jaw was clenched so tightly, a muscle jumped beneath his skin. Vivienne laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Well, that is settled. Guards, remove this clumsy girl and bring us fresh drinks. We have a betrothal to celebrate." The crowd began to murmur, conversations resuming in hushed, scandalized tones. Alara felt hands on her arms, guards prepared to escort her out. And suddenly, the numbness shattered. Rage flooded through her, hot and bright, burning away the pain for just a moment. She wrenched free of the guards and lifted her chin, meeting the Alpha King's gaze. With all the defiance she could summon, "You will regret this," she said quietly, but her voice carried in the vast hall. She did not know where the words came from, did not know what made her so certain, but she felt the truth of them in her bones. "One day, you will understand what you have thrown away, and by then, it will be too late." Matthias's eyes widened slightly, the first genuine reaction she had seen from him. But before he could respond, Ilara turned and fled. She ran through the corridors of the palace she had called home for 15 years, past the kitchens where she had worked since she was old enough to hold a knife, past the servants' quarters where her narrow bed and few possessions waited. She ran through the gates and into the night, her chest burning with pain that intensified with every step that took her farther from her mate, her rejected mate, the man who had chosen duty and politics over the rarest gift the moon goddess could bestow, the city of Silvermoon, spread below the palace like a tapestry of lights. But Ilara did not stop. She ran through cobblestone streets she had known all her life, past the market where she had shopped for kitchen supplies every morning, past the temple where she had prayed to a goddess who apparently did not care about her suffering. She ran until the buildings grew sparse and the forest loomed ahead, dark and forbidding. The Whispering Woods, people called it. No one entered after dark. There were stories, old stories, about things that hunted in the shadows, about wolves who went in and never came out. But Ilara did not care anymore. The pain in her chest had become unbearable, a constant scream that drowned out rational thought. She plunged into the trees, branches catching at her dress, roots trying to trip her feet. She ran deeper and deeper, until the city lights disappeared behind her, and the only sound was her own ragged breathing and the thundering of her heart. She did not know how long she ran. Time lost meaning in the endless dark beneath the canopy. But eventually, her strength gave out. She collapsed against the trunk of a massive oak, sliding down until she sat in the dirt and dead leaves. Her arms wrapped around herself as sobs tore from her throat. "Why?" she screamed into the darkness. "Why give me a mate only to have him reject me? Why make me feel this bond if it means nothing?" The forest offered no answer. She sat there crying until she had no tears left, until the pain settled into a dull, constant ache that she thought might never fade. That was when she heard it. A whisper, soft as breath, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Not nothing, daughter of the moon, never nothing. Ilara's head snapped up. She looked around wildly, but saw only trees and shadows. "Who is there?" she called, her voice hoarse from crying. The whisper came again, and this time she realized it was not coming from outside. It was inside her head, gentle but insistent. "Follow. The silver light. Little one. Follow it home." Ilara blinked, and suddenly she could see it. A faint silvery glow, like moonlight made tangible, forming a path between the trees. It should have been impossible. The forest canopy was too thick for moonlight to penetrate. But there it was, unmistakable, leading deeper into the woods. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to return to the palace and beg for her job back, to accept that she would spend her life in pain, feeling the ghost of a bond that had been severed before it could truly form. But something stronger than instinct pulled her forward. She had nothing left to lose. Ilara pushed herself to her feet and followed the silver light. It wound through the forest like a living thing, sometimes bright enough to illuminate the path clearly, sometimes fading to barely a glimmer. She walked for what felt like hours, climbing steadily upward as the terrain grew rockier, the trees more ancient and gnarled. The whisper continued, encouraging her, guiding her, calling her forward with words she could not quite make out, but that filled her with a strange sense of longing. Finally, the trees opened into a clearing, and Ilara stopped, her breath catching. Before her stood the ruins of what must have once been a magnificent temple. Massive stone pillars, covered in moss and climbing vines, reached toward the night sky. The remains of walls still bore intricate carvings, symbols she did not recognize but that seemed to pulse. With faint light, in the center of the ruins stood an altar, a flat stone surface carved with a spiral pattern that drew the eye inward, hypnotic and compelling. And above it all, impossibly bright and clear despite the forest canopy that should have blocked it, hung the full moon. "What is this place?" Ilara whispered. The voice in her head grew stronger, clearer. "Home," This is your home, daughter. This is where your story truly begins. Alara took a step forward, then another, drawn toward the altar as if by invisible strings. As she drew closer, she could see that the carvings were not just decorative. They were words in a language she should not be able to read, but somehow understood. Here stood the lunar temple, sacred to the moon-blessed dynasty, guardians of the ancient covenant, true rulers of the northern territories, protectors of the balance between man and wolf. Her foot caught on something, and she looked down to see a stone plaque, partially buried in dirt and leaves. She knelt and brushed it clean, revealing more of the strange writing. In the year of the blood moon, the usurper king Aldrich Blackthorn led his armies against the lunar temple. Queen Seraphina, last of the moon-blessed line, was slain upon this altar. Her daughter Lyanna, barely 3 years old, was spirited away by loyalists. The crown was stolen, the bloodline scattered. But the prophecy remains. When the moon calls her daughter home, when royal blood touches sacred stone, the true heir shall awaken and reclaim what was stolen. Alara's hands were shaking. Blackthorn. The usurper king had been named Blackthorn, and that was Matthias's family name, the line that had ruled for 200 years. And this temple, this place dedicated to a dynasty she had never heard of, felt more like home than anywhere she had ever been. This cannot be real, she said aloud. I am nobody. I am an orphan who grew up in the palace kitchens. I do not even have a wolf. But even as she spoke, she felt a stirring inside her, something she had never felt before. A presence, ancient and powerful, uncoiling from some deep place within her soul. You had no wolf because you were not ready, the voice whispered. You had no wolf because your power was sleeping, waiting, protected, until the moment you would need it most. You are not nobody, daughter. You are everything. You are the heir the prophecy spoke of. You are the lost princess of the moon-blessed dynasty. You are Alara Sylvanus, and your blood carries the power of every queen who came before you. Alara looked at her hands, at the calluses and scars from years of kitchen work, and laughed bitterly. If I am a lost princess, someone did a terrible job of hiding me. I have been in the Blackthorn Palace my entire life. The presence inside her grew stronger, and with it came images, flashing through her mind like memories that were not her own. A woman running through the night, a baby clutched to her chest, soldiers pursuing. A desperate choice, hiding the child in the one place the usurper king would never think to look, among the servants in his own palace. A spell woven in blood and moonlight, suppressing the child's power, making her invisible, unremarkable, protecting her until the time was right. Your protector died keeping your secret, the voice said softly. She was the last of the temple priestesses, and she gave her life to ensure you would survive. She placed you in the kitchens and wove a forgetting spell over anyone who might question where you came from. You have lived your whole life, steps away from the throne that is rightfully yours, hidden in plain sight. Tears streamed down Alara's face, but they were not tears of pain this time. They were tears of recognition, of pieces falling into place. She had always felt different, had always sensed that something was missing, some vital part of herself locked away. She had thought it was just because she had no wolf, because she was incomplete in a way that made her less than other shifters. But it had not been absence. It had been protection. What do I do? She asked. How do I awaken this power? The voice was gentle now, maternal almost. You already know, daughter. Your blood carries the key. Let it touch the altar, and your true self will be revealed. Alara stood and approached the altar slowly. Up close, she could see that the spiral carved into its surface was stained dark in places, as if with old blood. This was where Queen Seraphina had died, where the last moon-blessed ruler had been murdered. And now, generations later, her descendant stood in the same spot, about to fulfill a prophecy that might change everything. She hesitated for only a moment. Behind her lay a life of servitude and invisibility, a rejected mate bond that would cause her pain for the rest of her days, a kingdom ruled by the descendants of those who had slaughtered her family. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility. The chance to become who she was always meant to be. Alara pulled a small knife from her belt, the one she used for peeling vegetables and preparing meals. The irony was not lost on her. She pressed the blade to her palm and drew it across, hissing at the sharp sting. Blood welled up, bright red against her pale skin. She held her hand over the altar and watched as drops fell onto the carved spiral, following the pattern inward toward the center. The moment her blood touched the stone, everything changed. Light exploded from the altar, pure silver brilliance that shot upward like a pillar connecting earth to sky. Alara cried out, trying to pull her hand back, but she was frozen in place, held by a power far greater than anything she had ever imagined. The light poured into her through the wound in her palm, racing through her veins like liquid fire. It burned, but it was not a painful burning. It was cleansing, purifying, stripping away years of suppression and revealing what had always been. Beneath. Alara threw her head back and screamed as power flooded every cell of her body. She could feel her wolf now, could feel the magnificent creature rising within her, far larger and stronger than any normal shifter's wolf should be. The presence was overwhelming, regal, ancient, with inherited memories from every moon-blessed queen who had come before. Her bones began to shift, reshape, and she fell to her knees as the transformation took her. Shifting for the first time should have been agonizing. Every book and story said so. But this was not agony. This was transcendence. Alara's body flowed like water, reshaping itself with an ease that spoke of perfect harmony between human and wolf. Within seconds, she stood on 4 legs instead of 2. Her perspective shifted. Her senses exploded into a symphony of scents and sounds she had never experienced. She looked down at her paws and saw fur the color of moonlight itself, pure silver that seemed to glow with its own inner radiance. She was massive, far larger than the wolves she had seen in the palace training grounds. A glimpse of her reflection in a puddle of rainwater showed eyes that burned with golden fire, a face that was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Power thrummed through her with every heartbeat. She could feel the earth beneath her feet, could sense the life force of every plant and creature in the forest. The moon above called to her, and she threw back her head and howled, a sound of pure triumph that echoed through the whispering woods and beyond, carrying across miles to reach even the palace in Silvermoon. In the grand hall, where the betrothal celebration was still in full swing, every wolf present stopped mid-conversation. They all heard it. That howl that spoke of ancient power awakened, and something primal in them recognized it as the call of true royalty. Matthias stood frozen, his wineglass halfway to his lips, as the sound washed over him. His wolf surged against his control. Desperate, frantic, howling in response to that distant call. The bond he had rejected, the connection he had thought he could sever through sheer will, blazed to life in his chest with renewed intensity. That was her. That was his mate. His rejected mate. And somehow she was transformed into something he could not understand. Vivian's hand tightened on his arm, her nails digging in hard enough to hurt through his sleeve. "What was that?" she demanded, her voice sharp with fear. But Matthias could not answer. He was staring out the tall windows toward the distant forest, where a pillar of silver light still glowed against the night sky. And for the first time since he had made his choice, doubt crept into his heart like poison. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. Back in the temple ruins, Alara shifted back to human form, the transformation flowing as naturally as breathing. She stood, naked in the moonlight, but she felt no shame, no vulnerability. She felt powerful, whole, complete in a way she had never been before. The voice came one last time, fading now that its purpose was fulfilled. "You know what you must do, my daughter. You know what your destiny requires." But remember this. The crown is yours by right of blood, but a true queen rules with wisdom, not vengeance. The man who rejected you carries the blood of usurpers, yes, but he is not his ancestor. What you do with this power, how you reclaim your throne, that choice is yours alone. Choose wisely. Then the presence was gone, and Alara was alone with her thoughts and her newfound strength. She looked around the clearing and spotted a chest, half buried beneath vines near one of the fallen pillars. She walked to it and pulled it free, the lock crumbling to dust at her touch. Inside, carefully preserved by some spell that had kept them intact through the centuries, were clothes. A dress of midnight blue, silk, embroidered with silver thread in patterns that matched the carvings on the altar, soft leather boots, and nestled in silk wrapping, a circlet of silver metal worked to look like intertwined vines and crescent moons. Not a full crown, but a symbol of royalty nonetheless. Alara dressed slowly, savoring the feel of fine fabric against her skin for the first time in her life. The dress fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Perhaps it had, crafted by some priestess who had seen the future, who had known that one day the heir would return. When she placed the circlet on her head, she felt another surge of power, smaller this time, but no less significant. This was a conduit, an amplifier for the magic that now sang in her blood. She could feel it connecting her to the earth, to the moon, to the very fabric of the world in a way that went beyond mere shifter abilities. She was not just a wolf. She was something more, something the modern world had forgotten could exist. A moon blessed, a wielder of ancient magic that had not been seen in 200 years. Alara took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. She had come into these woods a broken, rejected kitchen maid. She would leave them as a queen reclaiming her throne. But first, she needed to understand the full extent of what had been done to her family, needed to learn the truth that had been hidden. She needed answers, and she knew where to find them. The royal archives, the Blackthorn Kings kept detailed. Histories, records of every significant event in the kingdom's past. If she could get in, if she could access those documents, she could piece together the real story of what had happened to the Moon-Blessed dynasty. And fortunately, she knew every passage and hidden corridor in the palace. Years of being invisible had taught her how to move through the building unseen. Alara set off through the forest, but this time she did not run in panic and pain. She walked with purpose, her new wolf, lending her strength and speed even in human form. The journey that had taken hours in her desperate flight took less than one now. She emerged from the whispering woods as dawn began to paint the eastern sky pink and gold. The city of Silvermoon spread below her. The palace rose in the center, its white walls gleaming in the early light, banners bearing the blackthorn crest of a black wolf on a red field snapping in the morning breeze. Her palace, her city, her kingdom, stolen and held by those who had murdered her ancestors. The thought should have filled her with rage, but instead she felt a strange calm. Perhaps it was the accumulated wisdom of the queens, whose memories now lived in her blood, tempering her anger with patience. Or perhaps it was simply that she finally understood her purpose, finally knew who she was and what she needed to do. Alara pulled up the hood of her cloak, a simple brown traveling cloak that had also been in the chest, and made her way down into the city. The streets were just beginning to stir, early risers opening their shops and beginning their daily routines. No one gave her a second glance. She was just another traveler arriving with the dawn, unremarkable and unmemorable. The palace loomed larger as she approached. The main gates would be heavily guarded, but she did not need them. She skirted around to the eastern wall, where a drainage grate opened onto the river. The bars were spaced just widely enough for a slender person to squeeze through, and she had used this entrance many times when returning late from market runs. The guards never watched it because they never imagined anyone would be desperate or foolish enough to wade through sewage to enter the palace. Alara did not hesitate. She climbed down to the river's edge, slipped into the cold water, and pulled herself through the grate. The tunnel beyond was dark and foul-smelling, but she had traveled it before. She moved quickly, counting her steps, until she reached the ladder that led up into the storage cellars beneath the kitchens. She emerged into familiar territory, the underground rooms where supplies were kept. It was still early enough that the kitchen staff had not yet begun their day, though she could hear movement starting above. Alara moved like a ghost through corridors she knew by heart, up the servants' stairs to the main levels, avoiding the routes she knew would have guards. The archives were in the oldest part of the palace, in a wing that dated back to before the Blackthorn rule. She had cleaned those rooms many times, had dusted shelves of ancient books and scrolls, while the court historian worked at his desk, barely noticing her presence. The old man was scholarly and kind, lost in his research, and he had never minded when she lingered to look at the beautiful illuminated manuscripts. He would not be there yet. The archives did not officially open until mid-morning. Alara reached the heavy oak door and tested it. Locked, of course. But she had watched the historian open it hundreds of times, had memorized the combination he pressed into the mechanical lock. Her fingers moved over the numbered dials, and the lock clicked open. She slipped inside and closed the door behind her, her heart pounding. The archives were a maze of floor-to-ceiling shelves, each crammed with books, scrolls, and loose documents. Thousands of years of history, carefully preserved and catalogued. Somewhere in this vast collection was the truth. About her family. Alara closed her eyes and reached for her wolf, for the magic that now pulsed through her. She whispered a question to the power itself, asking it to guide her to what she needed. Warmth spread through her chest, and when she opened her eyes, she could see it again. That silver light, forming a path between the shelves. She followed it deep into the archives, to a section she had never been allowed to clean, marked with a sign that read, "Restricted access, royal seal required." The light stopped at a shelf behind a locked grate. Alara reached out and touched the metal, pouring a thread of her power into it. The lock resisted for a moment, then yielded with a soft click. Inside were documents that looked far older than anything else in the archives. Some on parchment so delicate it seemed like it might crumble at a touch. She carefully pulled out a leather-bound journal, the cover stamped with a symbol she now recognized. The crescent moon and stars of the moon-blessed. Dynasty. The journal fell open to a page dated 203 years earlier, written in elegant script. Tonight, Aldrich Blackthorn moves against us. Our scouts report his army approaches under cover of darkness. He has spent years building alliances, spreading lies about our family, poisoning the noble houses against us with tales of corruption and dark magic. In truth, he simply craves power, and he knows that while a moon blessed sits the throne, his ambitions will never be realized. I have sent Lyanna away with Priestess Mara. If the worst happens, if we fall tonight, perhaps my daughter will survive to reclaim what is ours. I have told Mara to hide her in the last place Aldrich would think to look, should he take the palace. Let my baby grow up safe, even if she must grow up hidden. Let her live, even if she never knows who she truly is. That is all a mother can ask. The entry ended there, and Alara's vision blurred with tears. This was Queen Seraphina's journal. Her, many times great-grandmother, writing on the last night of her life. The woman who had chosen to save her daughter instead of fleeing herself, who had stayed to fight and died on that altar. Alara carefully turned the pages, reading about the attack, about how the Blackthorn forces had overwhelmed the palace guards, about the brutal execution of every moon-blessed family member they could find. There were lists of the dead, names of nobles and commoners alike, who had been loyal to the true royal family and paid for it with their lives. And then, in a different hand, more recent entries. Someone had continued the journal, adding information over the years. Alara recognized the handwriting as belonging to old Marcus, the head steward who had helped her last night. Her hands shook as she read his words. 20 years since I watched Priestess Mara place the baby girl among the kitchen orphans. 20 years of keeping her secret, of ensuring she remained invisible and safe. The spell Mara wove before she died has held perfectly. No one questions where Alara came from. They simply accept she has always been here. But I grow old, and I fear what will happen when I am gone. Who will remember the truth? Who will tell her what she is when the time comes? I can only pray the moon goddess has a plan, that somehow the princess will awaken and reclaim her birthright. The Blackthorns are not evil rulers, I must admit. The current king is just and fair, his people prosper. But they sit on a stolen throne, and that stain will never wash away. If Alara never awakens, perhaps that is for the best. Perhaps the age of the moon blessed has passed, and we should let history remain buried. But in my heart, I do not believe that. I believe she is meant for greatness, and when the moment comes, I believe she will rise to claim it. The entry was dated 3 months ago, just before Marcus had fallen ill. He had not died, had recovered enough to return to his duties, but he was frail now, spending most of his time in his rooms. He had known. All these years, he had known exactly who she was, and had never said a word. Alara closed the journal carefully, and looked around at the other restricted documents. She found detailed accounts of the coup, battle reports, casualty lists. She found financial records showing how Aldrich Blackthorn had paid for his army by promising the noble houses land and titles once he took power. She found a document signed by a dozen lords, pledging their support to his claim in exchange for pieces of the moon-blessed territory. It was all there. 2 centuries of lies built on a foundation of murder and theft. The Blackthorns had rewritten history, painting the moon-blessed as tyrannical sorcerers who had held the kingdom under a spell, claiming the coup had been a liberation. They had destroyed or hidden any evidence to the contrary, had built their legitimacy on a story that was completely false. But they had made one mistake. They had allowed the archives to remain largely intact, had kept the old records even if they restricted access to them. Perhaps they thought no one would ever challenge them, that the moon-blessed line was extinct, and their secrets would stay buried forever. They had not counted on the lost princess surviving, had not counted on her finding her way back to this place, guided by the very magic they claimed had been dark and dangerous. Alara heard footsteps in the corridor outside and froze. The historian was arriving early. She quickly returned the journal to its place, closed the grate, and looked around for somewhere to hide. The silver light flared again, pointing to a small door in the corner she had never noticed before. She slipped through it just as she heard the main door open. The space beyond was tiny, barely more than a closet, filled with cleaning supplies. But it had a small window high on the wall that let in dusty morning light, and more importantly, it had another door that led to a narrow service corridor. Alara waited until she heard the historian settling at his desk, the scratch of his pen beginning, then carefully opened the second door and slipped into the corridor. Her mind was racing. She had confirmation now, had proof that everything the voice in her head had told her was true. She was the rightful heir, and the Blackthorns were usurpers. The question was what to do with that knowledge. She could reveal herself now, walk into the throne room and declare who she was. The circlet she wore, the power she could demonstrate, the documents in the archives, all of it would support her claim. But would anyone believe her? Would the nobles who had prospered under Blackthorn rule accept that their king's family had built everything on murder? Or would they band together to destroy her as they had destroyed her ancestors? She needed allies. She needed people who would support her claim, who would stand with her when she challenged the throne. And she needed to understand Matthias better, needed to know if he was like his ancestor Aldrich, or if he was truly the just king Marcus had described. The mate bond pulsed in her chest, weaker now than it had been before the rejection, but still present, still connecting her to the man who had thrown her away. She could use that, could get close to him, observe him, determine what kind of man he really was, and perhaps, just perhaps, make him regret his choice. The thought brought a smile to her lips. She had been powerless when he rejected her, a nobody he could dismiss without consequence. But she was not powerless anymore. She was his equal in power, his superior in birthright. And whether he knew it yet or not, his fate was now tied to hers. Alara made her way back through the servant passages to the cellars. She needed to retrieve a few things from her old room, needed to prepare for what came next. But as she walked through the familiar corridors, she realized that several servants she passed were staring at her strangely, their eyes widening, some of them gasping. She caught a glimpse of herself in a polished silver tray hanging on the wall, and understood. She no longer looked like the unremarkable kitchen maid who had lived here for 15 years. Her features were the same, but something fundamental had changed. Her bearing was different, straight and proud instead of hunched and apologetic. Her skin seemed to glow with an inner light, and her eyes, when they caught the light just right, flashed gold. The forgetting spell was broken. People could see her now, really see her, and they recognized that something was different, even if they could not articulate what. A young scullery maid named Beth, who had worked alongside Alara for years, approached hesitantly. "Alara, is that you? You look different. What happened to you?" Alara smiled gently at the girl. "I found something in the forest, Beth. Something that changed everything. Do not worry. I am still me. But I am also more than I was." Before Beth could ask more questions, a commotion erupted from the direction of the main hall. Raised voices, the clang of armor, running feet. Something was happening, something urgent. Alara followed the sounds, her curiosity overcoming caution. She emerged into one of the side galleries that overlooked the throne room and looked down at chaos. The Alpha King stood in the center of the room, still wearing the formal clothes from last night's celebration, though they were rumpled now as if he had not slept. His face was haggard, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion and something that looked like desperation. Before him knelt 3 scouts, covered in road dust, their expressions grim. "Say that again," Matthias commanded, his voice rough. "Slowly." One of the scouts cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, the pillar of light that appeared last night came from the Whispering Woods, from the old temple ruins. We investigated at first light and found evidence of powerful magic, the likes of which has not been seen in generations. And there was a scent, a wolf scent, but stronger than any we have encountered. It matches the howl we all heard." Another scout stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we believe someone has awakened ancient power in that temple. The prophecies speak of the moon-blessed line returning when the time is right." "What if—" "Impossible," Vivian interrupted, stepping forward from where she had been standing near the throne. She looked as immaculate as ever despite the early hour, not a hair out of place, though her eyes were hard. "The moon-blessed are extinct. Everyone knows this. You speak of fairy tales and legends." Matthias held up a hand for silence. He was staring at nothing, his jaw clenched, clearly wrestling with something internal. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "The maid I rejected. She ran into those woods last night. And the howl, the power I felt in that howl, it felt like—" He trailed off, shaking. His head. "It felt like her. Like the bond, but magnified 1,000 times." Marcus entered the throne room, moving slowly with his walking stick, and every eye turned to him. The old steward looked directly at Matthias and said calmly, "Your Majesty, perhaps it is time you learned the full truth about the girl you rejected. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below." Vivian's hand went to the dagger at her belt, her posture shifting subtly to something more predatory. "Marcus, I would be very careful about what you say next. Spreading sedition is a crime punishable by death, even for someone of your years in service." But Marcus ignored her, his gaze never leaving Matthias. "I am dying, Lady Vivian. The healers give me perhaps another month, 2 if I am fortunate. I have no fear of death, and I will not go to my grave with this secret still locked inside me. His Majesty deserves to know what he has done." Matthias descended from the throne. Platform, moving toward Marcus with an expression of mingled concern and confusion. "What are you talking about, old friend? What secret?" Marcus took a deep breath, and when he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the hall. "The girl you rejected last night, the kitchen maid you deemed unworthy to be your mate, is Alara Sylvanus, last surviving heir of the Moon-Blessed dynasty, rightful queen of the Northern Territories, and the only person in this kingdom who outranks you by birth." The words fell into absolute silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Then pandemonium erupted. Nobles began shouting. Guards reached for weapons. Vivienne's face went white with shock and rage. Matthias stood frozen, staring at Marcus as if he had grown a second head. "That is impossible," he finally said. "The Moon-Blessed line died out 2 centuries ago when my ancestor Aldrich took the throne. There were no survivors. The histories are clear on this point." Marcus smiled sadly. "The histories your family wrote, you mean? Go to the restricted archives, Your Majesty. Read the documents that are locked away, the ones you are never told about. Read Queen Seraphina's journal if you dare. Learn what really happened the night your ancestor murdered a family and stole a crown." From her vantage point above, Alara felt her breath catch. Marcus was doing this for her, exposing the truth even though it might cost him his life. She wanted to reveal herself, to stand beside him and claim her identity, but something held her back. This moment was not about her yet. This was about forcing Matthias and his court to confront the lies their kingdom was built on. "Lies!" Vivienne shrieked. "He is a senile old man spreading dangerous fiction. Arrest him immediately." But Matthias raised a hand, his face thoughtful despite the shock. "No. If Marcus is willing to stake his life and reputation on these claims, I owe it to him to investigate. I will go to the archives myself and see these documents he speaks of." He turned to his captain of the guard. "Daniel, escort Marcus to his quarters and ensure he is comfortable and safe. No one is to disturb him or threaten him. He is under my personal protection." Then Matthias strode from the throne room, his long legs eating up the distance. Alara barely had time to duck back into the corridor before he passed below her, heading toward the archives wing. She followed at a distance, using the servant passages to parallel his route. She wanted to see this, wanted to watch him confront the truth about his family. The historian looked up in surprise when the Alpha King burst through the archive doors. "Your Majesty, I was not expecting you. How may I serve?" Matthias's voice was tense. "The restricted section. I need access to everything locked behind the royal seal. Immediately." The historian's eyebrows rose, but he did not question. He retrieved a key from his desk drawer and led Matthias to the grated area. Within minutes, Matthias was holding Queen Seraphina's journal, reading the same passages Alara had read just an hour before. Alara watched through a crack in the supply closet door as his expression changed, hardening with each page he turned. She saw the moment he reached the entry about Lyanna being hidden in the palace, saw his hand begin to tremble. He set down the journal and reached for another document, and another, reading through the battle reports, the financial records, the signed pledges of support from noble houses. With each piece of evidence, his face grew more ashen. Finally, he straightened and turned to the historian, who had been hovering nervously nearby. "How long have these been here? How long has this information existed in my archives?" The old scholar wrung his hands. "The documents have been here since the beginning, Your Majesty. They were sealed by your ancestor Aldrich and marked restricted, accessible only to the reigning monarch. Your father read them when he took the throne, as did your grandfather before him. It is tradition that each new king learns the full truth, though what they choose to do with that knowledge varies." Matthias's voice was dangerously quiet. "My father knew. He knew our entire rule was based on murder and lies, and he never said anything. He let me grow up believing we were the rightful rulers. that the moon-blessed had been dark sorcerers who needed to be overthrown for the good of the kingdom. The historian nodded reluctantly. Your father believed that what was done could not be undone, that the stability of the kingdom was more important than ancient wrongs. He chose to maintain the status quo rather than risk chaos by revealing the truth. Matthias slammed his hand against the shelf, making ancient books rattle. And now I have rejected my true mate, who also happens to be the rightful queen, in favor of a political marriage that means nothing compared to the crime my family has committed. The mate bond pulled at him, that severed connection aching in his chest. She is out there somewhere, probably hating me, probably planning how to take back what is hers, and she has every right to do so. Every right to see me dead as payment for what the Blackthorns have done. He looked at the journal again, at Seraphina's elegant handwriting, and something crumpled in his expression. I thought I was doing my duty. I thought I was putting the kingdom first by honoring the treaty with Goldcrest. But I was really just perpetuating a cycle of injustice that started long before I was born. The historian remained silent, clearly uncertain what to say. Matthias gathered up several of the most damning documents and tucked them under his arm. I am taking these. I am going to call a council of the noble houses. They are going to learn what I just learned. And then we are going to discuss what must be done to make this right. He paused at the door and looked back. If Ilara Sylvanus is truly the moon-blessed heir, if she has awakened the power that has been dormant for 2 centuries, then she could destroy this kingdom if she chose to. She could call upon ancient magic we have no defense against. The only thing that might stay her hand is... He could not finish the sentence, but Ilara knew what he was thinking. The mate bond. The connection between them that even rejection had not fully severed. If she wanted revenge, if she wanted to watch his kingdom burn, the bond might be the only thing that could appeal to whatever mercy she might still hold for him. Ilara felt a complex tangle of emotions as she watched Matthias leave the archives. Part of her was satisfied that he now understood the magnitude of what his family had done, that he was suffering with the knowledge. But another part, the part still connected to him through that invisible thread, ached at seeing his pain. She waited until he was gone, then slipped from her hiding place. She had heard enough. Matthias knew the truth now, and he was planning to reveal it to the noble houses. That changed everything. She had expected to have to fight for recognition, to have to prove her claim against opposition and denial. But if Matthias himself was going to present the evidence, if he was going to acknowledge the injustice, then perhaps there was another path forward, one that did not require bloodshed and vengeance. The thought surprised her. She should want revenge, should want to see the Blackthorns stripped of everything as her family had been. But the memories that lived in her blood, the wisdom of the queens who had come before, whispered a different message. True strength was not about destruction. True strength was about building something better, from the ashes of the old. Ilara made her way back to Marcus's quarters, using the servant passages she knew so well. She found the old steward sitting in his favorite chair by the window, looking out over the palace gardens. He did not seem surprised when she entered. "There you are, child," he said softly. "I wondered when you would come. I felt the power awaken last night, felt the old magic stir. I knew the moment had finally arrived." Ilara knelt beside his chair and took his weathered hand in hers. "You kept me safe all these years. You knew who I was and never said a word, even when I was treated as the lowest servant, even when I was invisible and forgotten." Marcus smiled, tears gathering in his eyes. "Mara made me promise. She said the forgetting spell would protect you until you were ready, that revealing your identity too early would only get you killed. I have watched you grow from a tiny baby into a strong young woman, and I have never been more proud of anything in my life than keeping you safe." His expression grew serious. "But now the hard part begins, Ilara. Now you must decide what kind of queen you will be. Will you be one who rules through fear and vengeance, punishing the descendants for the crimes of their ancestors? Or will you be something better? Something your grandmother Serafina would have been proud of? Ilara felt tears spill down her own cheeks. I do not know, Marcus. I do not know how to be a queen. I have spent my entire life scrubbing floors and peeling potatoes. How am I supposed to rule a kingdom? The old man squeezed her hand with surprising strength. You will learn, and you will not be alone. There are still those of us who remember the old ways, who have kept the faith even through 2 centuries of Blackthorn rule. We will stand with you. But you must be wise, child. The kingdom is prosperous under the current rule. The people are happy. If you tear everything down in pursuit of justice for ancient wrongs, you might create more suffering than you prevent. It was the same message the voice in the temple had given her, the same wisdom echoing from multiple sources. Ilara took a deep breath and nodded. Then I will find a way that honors my family's memory without destroying innocent people who had nothing to do with what happened. But the Blackthorns cannot simply keep the throne as if nothing has changed. There must be accountability. There must be acknowledgement of the truth. Marcus smiled. Spoken like a true queen. Now, there is something you should know. The Alpha King has called an emergency council meeting for tonight. All the noble houses are being summoned. He is going to reveal everything to them. Show them the documents. Tell them about you. This is your chance, Ilara. This is the moment when you step forward and claim your birthright. Ilara stood, her mind already racing through possibilities. Will you be there? Marcus shook his head regretfully. I am too weak to attend formal council anymore. But Daniel, the captain of the guard, he is one of ours. His grandmother was a moon-blessed loyalist who survived the purge by hiding her beliefs. He will support you when the time comes, as will others, though they have kept their loyalties secret all these years. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver pendant, a crescent moon with a star at its center. This was your grandmother's. Mara gave it to me before she died, said to keep it until you were ready. Wear it tonight, and those who still honor the old ways will recognize you for who you are. Ilara took the pendant with reverent hands and fastened it around her neck. It was warm against her skin, thrumming with faint magic, a talisman blessed by priestesses, who were now 200 years dead. Thank you, Marcus, for everything, for keeping me safe, for revealing the truth, for being the father I never had. The old man's smile was bittersweet. It was my honor and privilege, Your Majesty. Now go. Prepare yourself. Tonight you take the first step toward reclaiming your throne. Ilara left Marcus's quarters and made her way through the palace with new purpose. She no longer tried to hide, no longer ducked her head when nobles passed in the corridors. She walked with her head high, and those who saw her felt compelled to step aside, some force they could not name telling them that this woman, whoever she was, commanded respect. She made her way to a section of the palace she had only ever cleaned, the guest wing where visiting nobles stayed. Most of the rooms were empty between social seasons, and she found one that was unlocked and unoccupied. It was lavishly furnished, with a massive 4-poster bed, rich carpets, and a wardrobe, full of clothes left behind by previous guests. Ilara bathed in the attached bathroom, washing away the last traces of dirt from the forest and the sewers. She let herself luxuriate in the hot water, in the scented oils and soft towels, things she had only ever provided for others. When she emerged, she felt reborn. She selected a gown from the wardrobe, a deep forest green that complemented her newly radiant skin, and brought out the gold flecks in her eyes. It was perhaps not as fine as the dress from the temple, but it was noble attire, far above what a servant should wear. She arranged her dark hair in an elaborate style she had learned from watching court ladies' maids, and placed the silver circlet on her head. The pendant Marcus had given her hung at her throat, clearly visible. When she looked at herself in the mirror, a stranger stared back. No, not a stranger. This was who she had always been beneath the suppression spell, beneath the years of being invisible. This was Ilara Sylvanus, moon-blessed heir, looking back at herself with eyes that had seen injustice and chosen not to let it define her. A knock at the door made her turn. She opened it to find Captain Daniel standing there, his expression respectful, but his eyes knowing. He was a man in his mid-30s, powerfully built, with kind eyes and a warrior's bearing. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, going down on one knee. "Marcus sent word that you might need an escort to the council chamber. I am at your service." Alara felt a rush of gratitude for this man she barely knew, who was willing to risk everything by supporting her claim. "Rise, Captain, and thank you. I will indeed need allies tonight." Daniel stood and offered her his arm. "You will have more than you know. There are dozens of us throughout the palace and the city. Families who have kept the faith in secret, who have waited generations for this moment. When you reveal yourself, we will stand with you." Together, they walked through the palace corridors toward the council chamber. Alara could feel eyes on her, could hear whispers following in her wake. Word was already spreading that something unprecedented was happening, that the Alpha King had called an emergency council, and that a mysterious woman wearing a royal circlet was being escorted by the captain of the guard himself. The council chamber was a vast circular room with a domed ceiling painted to show the phases of the moon. A long table dominated the center, with the king's chair at the head. Around the walls stood guards, and in the gallery above, scribes waited to record the proceedings. The noble houses were already assembled, dozens of lords and ladies in their finest attire, talking in nervous clusters. They all fell silent when Alara entered. She felt the weight of their stares, saw shock and confusion ripple through the crowd. No one knew who she was, but her bearing and the circlet on her head proclaimed her as someone important, someone they should recognize even though they did not. Matthias stood at the head of the table, documents spread before him. When his eyes landed on Alara, he went absolutely still. The mate bond surged between them, stronger now than it had been since the rejection, and she saw him sway slightly as the full force of it hit him. Vivian stood at his side, and when she saw Alara, her face contorted with rage. "You! How dare you show your face here, you presumptuous little nobody! Guards, remove this servant." From the council chamber immediately. But Daniel stepped forward, his hand on his sword. "Lady Vivian, I would advise you to watch your words. You are speaking to the rightful queen of the Northern Territories, and I will not tolerate disrespect toward her." The room erupted in shocked exclamations. Matthias held up a hand, and gradually silence fell. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse, as if the words were being dragged from him against his will. "Is it true? Are you really Alara Sylvanus, heir of the Moon Blessed?" Alara met his eyes directly, letting him see the truth in her gaze, letting him feel the power that now radiated from her. "I am, and I have come to claim what is mine." She let power flow through her, just a fraction of what she now commanded, and watched as silver light began to glow beneath her skin, as her eyes flared gold. The nobles gasped, some falling back in fear, others dropping to their knees instinctively. This was magic they had only read about in history. Books, power that had not been seen since the fall of the Moon-Blessed dynasty. Matthias closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, there was something that looked like grief in their depths. "Then I owe you an apology that words cannot adequately convey. I rejected you in ignorance, chose political expedience over truth, and in doing so, I have committed an injustice against you and against the memory of your family." He turned to address the assembled nobles. "My lords and ladies, I have called you here tonight to reveal a truth that my family has hidden for 200 years. The Blackthorn dynasty is built on murder and theft. My ancestor Aldrich did not liberate this kingdom from dark sorcerers. He slaughtered a rightful ruling family to steal their throne, and every king since has known this, and chosen to maintain the lie." He began distributing copies of the documents he had taken from the archives, walking around the table to place them in front of shocked nobles. "Read for yourselves. see the evidence of what was done, and then we will discuss what justice demands." The chamber descended into chaos as nobles began reading, their exclamations of shock and horror filling the air. Some looked angry, some afraid, some calculating as they began to understand how this revelation might shift the balance of power. Lord Ashford, an elderly nobleman whose family had served the Blackthorns for generations, stood with shaking hands. If this is true, if the moon... Blessed line lives, then by law and by right, the throne belongs to Lady Alara. The question is not whether she should rule, but whether she will be merciful to those who unknowingly benefited from the crime against her family. All eyes turned to Alara. This was the moment she had known would come, the moment when she would have to decide what kind of queen she would be. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Alara stood tall, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders, feeling the expectations of the dead queens whose blood ran in her veins. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly before she spoke. "I did not choose this destiny. I did not ask to discover that I am the heir to a murdered dynasty, that the life I have known was a lie built to protect me. But I will not run from what I am, and I will not shirk the responsibility that my blood demands I accept." She walked slowly around the council table, meeting the eyes of each noble in turn. Some met her gaze with defiance, some with fear, some with cautious hope. My ancestor Queen Seraphina wrote in her journal on the night she died that she wanted her daughter to live, even if it meant living in hiding, even if it meant never knowing her true heritage. She chose life over vengeance, chose hope over hatred. I intend to honor that choice. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Blackthorn family took my family's throne through violence. I could take it back the same way. I have the power now, make no mistake about that. I could reduce this palace to rubble with the magic I command. I could call upon ancient forces that you have no defense against. Silver light flickered around her fingertips, demonstrating the truth of her words. But what would that accomplish? More death, more destruction, more orphaned children who grow up dreaming of revenge. The cycle would continue endlessly, and the kingdom my ancestors built would tear itself apart. Lord Ashford leaned forward. "Then what do you propose, Your Majesty? How do we reconcile the injustice of the past with the stability of the present?" Alara turned to look at Matthias, who had been standing silent throughout her speech, his eyes never leaving her face. The Alpha King has shown courage in revealing the truth when he could have kept it hidden. He has proven that he values justice over his family's reputation. That means something to me. She took a step toward Asi. Him, feeling the mate bond pull and sing between them. I propose a solution that honors both the past and the future. I will not simply take the throne and cast out the Blackthorns. Instead, I propose a shared rule, a partnership between the moon-blessed heir and the current king. We will rule together, combining the ancient magic of my bloodline with the political knowledge and established authority of his. The chamber erupted again, nobles shouting over each other. Some called it brilliant, a way to unite the kingdom rather than divide it. Others called it madness, an impossible arrangement that would lead to conflict and chaos. Vivian's voice cut through the din like a knife. "This is ridiculous. You cannot simply invent a new form of government because you feel guilty, Matthias. You are betrothed to me. We have a treaty with Goldcrest that depends on our marriage. If you break that agreement, you risk war." Matthias turned to her, and his expression was cold in a way Alara had never seen. "The treaty with Goldcrest was negotiated in bad faith, Vivian. Your father knew about my mate bond to Alara before he ever arrived for the betrothal ceremony. He knew, and he said nothing, hoping I would choose political advantage over the sacred bond. That is a betrayal that voids any agreement we made." Vivian's face went white. "That is a lie. My father would never—" But Matthias was already pulling another document from his stack, one Alara had not seen before. "Your father's spymaster sent him regular reports on happenings in my court. I found this in the archives. intercepted years ago by my own intelligence service and filed away. In it, your father's agent specifically mentions sensing the potential for a mate bond between the king and a servant girl, and recommends expediting the marriage contract before the bond can manifest. Your family has been planning to trap me in this marriage for years, knowing it would prevent me from finding my true mate. He threw the document down on the table in front of Vivian. Read it yourself. See your father's seal at the bottom, authorizing payment to the spy who wrote it. Vivian snatched up the paper, her hands shaking as she read. The color drained from her face completely, and for a moment, Alara almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then Vivian looked up, and the expression on her face was pure venom. Fine. You want her? You want this nobody who spent her life in the kitchens, this girl who could not even shift until yesterday? Then take her. But do not expect Goldcrest to stand by while you insult us. My father will hear of this, and when he does, you will have war on your borders within a month. She turned on her heel and stormed from the council chamber, her ladies-in-waiting scrambling to follow. The heavy doors slammed behind her with a boom that echoed through the room. In the silence that followed, Matthias turned back to Alara. I am sorry, he said quietly. For all of it. For the rejection. For the pain I caused you. For the crimes my family committed against yours. If I could undo any of it, I would. Alara felt the sincerity in his words through the mate bond. Felt his genuine remorse and his confusion about how to make things right. Part of her wanted to forgive him immediately, to let the bond pull them together and forget everything that had happened. But she was not the powerless servant anymore, and she would not let him off that easily. I appreciate your apology, Alpha King. But apologies do not erase what happened. If we are to rule together, it must be as true equals. Not as king and consort, not as superior and subordinate. As partners with equal authority and equal voice. She pulled the silver circlet from her head and held it up for all to see. This is a symbol of my birthright, of the moon-blessed dynasty that ruled for 1,000 years before your family took power. I will not hide it, will not pretend to be less than I am. If you can, accept me as your equal. If you can accept that your throne rightfully belongs to both of us, then we can move forward. But if you cannot, then we will have to find another solution. Matthias stared at the circlet, at the ancient symbol of power he had probably seen in history books, but never expected to see worn by a living person. Then, slowly, deliberately, he went down on one knee before her. The gesture sent shockwaves through the assembled nobles. The Alpha King, kneeling before someone else, was unheard of. I accept you as my equal, Alara Sylvanus. I recognize your claim to the throne, and I acknowledge that my family's rule has been built on injustice. If you will have me, I will stand beside you as your partner in ruling this kingdom. I will help you restore your family's honor and ensure that the truth of what happened is never forgotten again. He looked up at her, and in his gray eyes she saw something beyond remorse now. She saw the beginning of genuine respect, perhaps, even admiration. The mate bond thrummed between them, stronger than ever, no longer fighting against rejection, but instead singing with possibility. Alara felt her heart race as she looked down at this powerful man kneeling before her, offering her everything she should want. The throne, recognition, justice for her family. And yet something made her hesitate. Stand up, Matthias, she said softly. A true partnership does not begin with one person kneeling to the other. He rose, and they stood facing each other across a space that felt vast, despite being only a few feet. The mate bond pulled at both of them, urging them together, but neither moved to close the distance. There is much to discuss, Alara continued, addressing the room now. The structure of a joint rule, the restoration of moon-blessed history to the public record, the question of what to do about Goldcrest and their threats of war. These are not decisions to be made in one night, in the heat of revelation and emotion. I propose we adjourn this council and reconvene tomorrow, giving everyone time to process what they have learned and to consider the path forward. Lord Ashford nodded. Wisely spoken, Your Majesty. Though I have one question before we disperse. Where will you be staying tonight? It seems inappropriate for you to return to the servants' quarters, but we have not prepared royal apartments for you. Matthias spoke before Alara could answer. The Queen's suite has stood empty since my mother's death 5 years ago. It is yours by right, Alara. I will have it prepared immediately. He turned to Daniel. Captain, please ensure Lady Alara is escorted safely to the Queen's suite and that she has everything she needs. Post guards outside her door, ones you trust absolutely. Daniel saluted. It will be done, Your Majesty. He emphasized the title slightly, making it clear he was addressing Alara, not Matthias, and several nobles noticed the gesture. The council began to disperse. Nobles clustering in small groups as they left, their voices low and urgent as they discussed this unprecedented turn of events. Alara could hear fragments of their conversations, some supporting her claim, some expressing doubt, some already calculating how this shift in power might benefit their own houses. When most of the room had cleared, only Matthias, Alara, and Daniel remained. An awkward silence stretched between them until Matthias finally spoke. I know you have no reason to trust me. No reason to believe anything I say after what I did to you. But I want you to know that my acceptance of you as co-ruler is not just about avoiding war or doing what is politically convenient. The moment you walked into this chamber tonight, the moment I saw what you have become, I understood what a fool I was to reject you. He took a step closer, and Alara felt the mate bond surge in response. The pull is stronger now than it was before, even though I formally rejected you. It is as if your awakening has reinforced the bond, made it impossible to truly sever. I do not know what that means, but I know that when I look at you now, I see not just my mate, but someone extraordinary, someone who deserves far better than what I gave you. Alara felt her breath catch. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let down her guard and accept the bond that was trying so hard to pull them together. But she had been hurt too deeply, too recently, to make herself that vulnerable again. Pretty words. Alpha King. But I have learned that words are easy. Actions are what matter. If you truly believe what you say, then prove it. Show me through your deeds that you see me as your equal, that you will honor the partnership we are proposing. Until then, we will maintain a professional distance. Matthias's face showed pain, but he nodded. I understand. And I will prove myself to you, however long it takes. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect between equals, and left the chamber. Daniel waited, until the king was gone before speaking. That took courage, Your Majesty. Many would have seized the opportunity to fully reconcile, to let the mate bond override all other considerations. Alara smiled tiredly. The bond is powerful, Captain, but I refuse to let it make me weak. I have spent too many years being powerless, being at the mercy of others' decisions. I will not surrender that hard-won strength just because chemistry and fate say I should. She turned toward the door. Now please, show me to these royal apartments. I am exhausted, and I have a feeling tomorrow will be even more challenging than today has been. Daniel led her through the palace to a wing she had only ever entered to clean. The Queen's suite was magnificent, a series of interconnected rooms decorated in blues and silvers, with tall windows overlooking the royal gardens. Fresh flowers had already been placed in vases, the bed made with fine linens, a wardrobe filled with gowns in various sizes. The staff had worked with incredible speed to prepare the space. There is a bathing chamber through that door, Daniel explained, and a private study through the other. Guards will be posted in the corridor at all times. If you need anything, just ring. He indicated a bell pull near the bed. Alara nodded her thanks, and Daniel withdrew, closing the door softly behind him. Finally alone, Alara allowed herself to collapse onto a velvet settee, the events of the past day crashing over her all at once. Less than 24 hours ago, she had been a kitchen maid, invisible and powerless, experiencing the worst moment of her life as her mate rejected her in front of hundreds of witnesses. Now she was claiming a throne, wielding ancient magic, and negotiating the future of the kingdom as an equal with the man who had thrown her away. It was too much. Too fast. She felt like she was acting a part rather than living her real life. But when she looked at her hands and saw the silver light that flickered beneath her skin, when she felt her wolf stirring contentedly inside her soul, she knew this was not a dream. This was her new reality, and she would have to find the strength to live up to it. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting Daniel, or perhaps a servant bringing food. Instead, Marcus shuffled in, leaning heavily on his walking stick, but with eyes that sparkled with joy. "I heard what happened in the council chamber, Your Majesty. They are calling you wise beyond your years, saying you showed the heart of a true queen." He made his way to a chair and lowered himself into it with a grateful sigh. "I wanted to see you before I sleep. Wanted to tell you how proud I am of the woman you have become." Alara went to him and took his hand. "I could not have done this without you, Marcus. Without your protection all these years. Without your courage in revealing the truth." The old man smiled. "It was my honor. And now I can die in peace, knowing that the moon-blessed line lives, that justice will finally be served." His words sent a chill through Alara. "Do not speak of dying. You have to stay, Marcus. I need you. I do not know how to be a queen, and there is no one else I trust to guide me." Marcus squeezed her hand weakly. "You will find your way, child. You have good instincts and a kind heart. That is all any ruler truly needs. As for me, my time is nearly done. I can feel it in my bones. But I am not afraid. I will go to my rest, knowing I fulfilled my promise to Mara, that I kept you safe until you could stand on your own." Tears streamed down Alara's face. "Stay with me a little while longer, please. There is so much I want to ask you. So much I need to know about my family, about the old ways." Marcus nodded. "Then ask, Your Majesty. I will tell you everything I remember while I still can." They talked long into the night, Marcus sharing stories of the moon-blessed dynasty, of queens had ruled with wisdom and compassion, of the magic that had flowed through the bloodline for generations. He told her about her grandmother Seraphina, about the beloved queen's dedication to her people, about how she had tried to negotiate peace with Aldrich Blackthorn right up until the moment he sent his assassins. He told her about Priestess Mara, about the powerful woman who had given her life to ensure a baby princess would survive. He told her about the loyalists who had kept the faith. Through 2 centuries of Blackthorn rule, passing down stories and beliefs in secret, waiting for the day when the true heir would return. By the time Marcus finally stood to leave, Alara's head was spinning with information, with the weight of history and expectation. But she also felt more grounded, more connected to the legacy she was claiming. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, embracing him carefully. "For everything. For the stories, for your protection, for your faith in me." The old man hugged her back with surprising strength. "No, thank you, my queen. You have given me the greatest gift possible. You have allowed me to see the prophecy fulfilled before I die. That is more than most people ever get." He pulled back and looked at her seriously. "Now I will give you one last piece of advice. The Alpha King, Matthias, he is a good man despite his family's history. He was raised to believe the lies, but when confronted with truth, he chose honesty over comfort. That takes character. Do not close your heart to him completely. The mate bond exists for a reason, and fighting it will only cause you both pain." Alara smiled through her tears. "I will consider your advice, but I make no promises." Marcus chuckled. "Fair enough. Now I must sleep. This old body needs its rest." He shuffled toward the door, then paused and looked back. "You know, Seraphina would have loved you. You have her strength but also her mercy. You will be a great queen, Alara Sylvanas. Perhaps the greatest the kingdom has ever known. Then he was gone, leaving Alara alone with her thoughts. She prepared for bed slowly, changing into a silk nightgown that had been left in the wardrobe, brushing out her hair. When she finally climbed between the soft sheets, she expected to fall asleep immediately, exhausted by everything that had happened. But sleep would not come. Her mind kept replaying the day, kept returning to the moment when Matthias had knelt before her, when the mate bond had sung with renewed strength. She tried to tell herself it meant nothing, that she could rule beside him as partners without letting the bond affect her judgment. But she knew she was lying to herself. The bond was too strong, the pull too intense to simply ignore. Eventually, she got out of bed and walked to the window. The moon hung full and bright in the night sky, bathing the gardens below in silver light. She felt drawn to it, felt her wolf stirring with the need to run beneath that light. Before she could second-guess herself, Alara opened the window and climbed out onto the wide stone balcony beyond. The night air was cool on her skin, refreshing after the stuffiness of the room. She let the transformation take her, felt her body shift and reshape until she stood on 4 legs, her silver fur gleaming in the moonlight. Then she jumped. The drop to the gardens below was significant, but she landed lightly, her powerful wolf body absorbing the impact easily. She took off running. Through the manicured paths, past flower beds and fountains, reveling in the simple joy of movement and freedom. For these few moments, she was not a queen with the weight of a kingdom on her shoulders. She was just a wolf, running beneath the moon. She did not realize she was being followed until she caught his scent on the wind. Matthias, in his wolf form, dark as midnight, where she was silver as moonlight. He kept his distance, not approaching, but not leaving either, as if asking permission to run with her. Alara should have sent him away, should have maintained the professional distance she had insisted on. But the wolf in her wanted a pack, wanted the connection that the mate bond promised. And beneath the moon, with ancient magic singing in her blood, it felt safe to let him close. She slowed her pace, allowing him to catch up. When he came alongside her, she felt the rightness of it, 2 halves of a whole finally running together. They raced through the gardens, leaping over hedges and splashing through ornamental pools, not speaking because wolves did not speak, just existing in the moment. When they finally stopped, panting and exhilarated, they shifted back to human form simultaneously. They stood facing each other in a secluded grove, both breathing hard, neither wearing anything but moonlight. Matthias spoke first, his voice rough. I could not sleep. I felt you awaken, felt you leave your rooms through the bond. I thought you might need protection, but I see. You need nothing of the sort. You are magnificent, Alara. Your wolf is like nothing I have ever seen. Alara crossed her arms over her chest, suddenly very aware of their nakedness and proximity. You should not be here. We agreed to maintain distance. He took a step closer, and she saw the war in his eyes, duty and desire battling for dominance. I know we agreed, and I will honor that agreement. But you asked me to prove through actions that I see you as my equal, that I will be your true partner. So let me start now. Let me tell you everything, so there are no more secrets between us. He ran a hand through his dark hair, looking suddenly vulnerable in a way she had never seen him. I knew about the mate bond the moment you walked into the banquet hall with that tray. I felt it snap into place, felt my wolf recognize you as ours. And I panicked because I had no idea what to do. I had already promised Vivian, had already signed treaties that bound me to that marriage. I thought if I rejected you immediately, publicly, I could cut the bond before it had a chance to fully form. He laughed bitterly. I was such a fool. You do not reject your mate and walk away unscathed. The pain of it has been constant since that moment, a physical ache that never fades. And when I felt your power awaken last night, when I heard that howl, the bond strengthened instead of weakening. It was as if your wolf was calling to mine, saying that I could reject you as much as I wanted. But it would never change what we are to each other. Alara felt her breath catch. She had felt the pain too, had assumed it was one-sided, that the bond only hurt the one who was rejected. But Matthias had been suffering as well, choosing duty over his own well-being. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked softly. Matthias met her eyes, and in his gaze she saw raw honesty. "Because I want you to understand that when I knelt before you tonight, when I recognized you as my equal and offered to rule beside you, it was not just about politics or avoiding conflict. It was about grabbing at a second chance I do not deserve, at the possibility that maybe, somehow, you might eventually forgive me enough that we could try to build what the bond is demanding we have." He did not move closer, did not try to touch her, but the intensity of his words was like a physical caress. "I am not asking you to accept me tonight, or tomorrow, or even next month. I know I have to earn your trust, have to prove myself worthy of being your mate and your partner. But I needed you to know that I will spend however long it takes trying to make this right. Not because I am politically cornered, or because the kingdom demands it, but because the thought of living the rest of my life without you, feeling this bond pulling at me while knowing I threw you away, is more than I can bear." Alara felt tears gathering in her eyes. The bond was singing between them now, stronger than ever, pulling so hard it took all her willpower not to close the distance between them. "You hurt me," she whispered. "In front of hundreds of people, you looked at me like I was nothing and threw me away. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" Matthias's face crumpled with pain. "I do now. I felt it through the bond, felt the echo of your agony even as I caused it. It was like stabbing myself while stabbing you, and I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life." He took a shaky breath. "But I also believe the Moon Goddess does not make mistakes. If she gave us this bond, if she made us mates despite every logical reason we should not be, then there must be a purpose to it. Maybe we are meant to heal the wounds between our families, to unite the kingdom in a way that could never happen if we came together without conflict first. I do not know, but I want the chance to find out." Alara wiped at her tears, frustrated by her own emotional vulnerability. She was supposed to be strong, supposed to be the powerful queen reclaiming her throne, not a girl crying over a man who had rejected her. But Marcus's words echoed in her mind. The mate bond existed for a reason. Fighting it would only cause pain. "I cannot simply forgive you, Matthias," she said finally. "What you did was too big, too painful, and I will not let the bond override my judgment, just because it is easier than maintaining boundaries." She paused, gathering her courage. "But I also cannot deny what I feel when I look at you. When we run together beneath the moon, the bond is real, and it is powerful, and fighting it completely would be futile." She took a deep breath. "So, here is what I propose. We give ourselves time. We work together as partners ruling this kingdom. We build trust through our actions, and we let the bond develop naturally instead of forcing it or rejecting it. If, eventually, we reach a place where I can truly forgive what happened, where we can be mates in more than just name, then we will know it is real and not just the bond manipulating us." Matthias nodded slowly, hope beginning to dawn in his eyes. "I can accept that. I will accept whatever terms you set, as long as there is a possibility, however small, that we might find our way to each other eventually." They stood there in the moonlit grove, the mate bond humming between them, a connection that could not be broken no matter how hard either of them might try. Finally, Matthias gestured toward the palace. "We should return before anyone notices we are both gone. The last thing we need is more scandal when we are trying to establish a new government structure." Alara nodded and allowed her wolf to take over again, shifting smoothly back into her silver form. Matthias did the same, and they ran back through the gardens side by side, no longer racing but moving in perfect synchronization, as if they had been running together for years instead of minutes. At the base of Alara's balcony, they shifted back one last time. Matthias looked up at the window, and then at Alara. "I can give you a boost up if you need it." She smiled despite herself. "I am moon-blessed, remember? I have abilities beyond normal shifters." She crouched and then leaped, easily clearing the 15 feet to land gracefully on the balcony. She looked down to see Matthias staring up at her with an expression of awe. "Good night, Alpha King," she called softly. "Tomorrow we begin building something new." He smiled, and for the first time since she had met him, it was a real smile, genuine and warm. "Good night, Your Majesty. Sleep well." He shifted back to his wolf form and disappeared into the shadows of the garden. Alara climbed back through her window and changed into her nightgown again, but this time when she lay down, sleep came easily. Her last thought before drifting off was that maybe, just maybe, something good could come from all this pain after all. She woke the next morning to sunshine streaming through her windows and a soft knock at the door. "Come in," she called, sitting up and running her hands through her tangled hair. A young woman entered, carrying a breakfast tray. She was dressed in the uniform of a palace servant, but when she looked at Alara, her eyes were bright with barely contained excitement. "Good morning, Your Majesty. I am Sarah, and I have been assigned as your personal maid. I hope that is acceptable?" Alara studied the girl, who could not have been more than 20. "Did you volunteer for this position, Sarah?" The girl blushed. "Yes, Your Majesty. My grandmother was a moon-blessed loyalist. She told me stories about the old days, about the rightful dynasty, all my life. When word spread that you had returned, I begged Captain Daniel to let me serve you." She set the tray on the bedside table and curtsied deeply. "It is an honor beyond measure to serve the true queen." Alara felt warmth spread through her chest. She had allies, people who believed in her claim not because they were forced to, but because they had kept faith through generations of waiting. "Thank you, Sarah. I am honored to have you in my service. Now tell me what is happening in the palace this morning. What are people saying?" Sarah's eyes lit up with gossip. "Everyone is talking about you, Your Majesty. Some of the nobles who attended the council meeting last night are spreading the story, and it has reached every corner of the palace. The servants especially are amazed. They are saying that one of their own has become a queen, that it proves anyone can rise if they have the courage and the right." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Lady Vivian left before dawn with all her retinue. She was in a terrible rage, they say, throwing things and screaming about betrayal. And the Alpha King spent half the night in the gardens, running in his wolf form. Some people think he was troubled by the revelations. Others think he was just restless." Alara hid her smile, knowing the truth about Matthias's restlessness. "And what does the city think? Have the common people heard the news yet?" Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Town criers went out at dawn to announce that the moon-blessed line has returned, and that you and the Alpha King will rule jointly. The reaction has been mixed. Some people are celebrating, saying it is like something from a fairy tale. Others are worried about instability, about what it means for treaties and alliances. But from what I hear, most people are just curious to see you, to witness the return of magic they thought was extinct." She straightened and became more formal. "Speaking of which, the Alpha King has requested your presence at a meeting in 2 hours. The council is reconvening to discuss the practical matters of establishing a joint rule, and there is also news from the border. Messengers arrived from Goldcrest at dawn." Alara felt her good mood evaporate. She had known there would be consequences to breaking the betrothal, but she had hoped for more time before dealing with them. "What did the messengers say?" Sarah's expression grew serious. "I do not know the details, Your Majesty, but the word in the kitchens is that Lord Goldcrest is demanding compensation for the broken treaty and threatening to withdraw his forces from the northern border. Without Goldcrest's army supporting ours, we would be vulnerable to attack from the mountain tribes." Alara closed her eyes briefly. This was exactly the kind of political complication she had no experience handling. In the span of 2 days, she had gone from kitchen maid to queen. But that did not mean she magically understood how to navigate international relations and military alliances. She would have to trust Matthias's experience and her own instincts, and hope it was enough. Thank you for the information, Sarah. Now, please help me prepare for this meeting. I need to look like a queen, not a servant playing dress-up. Sarah brightened immediately. Oh, Your Majesty, you are going to look magnificent. The palace seamstresses worked through the night creating new gowns for you. Wait until you see them. 2 hours later, Ilara entered the council chamber wearing a gown of deep midnight blue, embroidered with silver thread in patterns that matched the carvings from the ancient temple. Her dark hair was swept up in an elaborate style, the silver circlet resting on her head like it had always belonged there. The pendant Marcus had given her hung at her throat, and she had added silver cuffs on her wrists that Sarah said had been recovered from old moon-blessed artifacts in the palace vaults. The effect was stunning. When Ilara walked into the room, every conversation stopped. Nobles who had seen her the night before still stared as if seeing her for the first time. She radiated power and authority, no longer the invisible servant, but a true queen. Matthias stood at the head of the table, and when his eyes met hers, the mate bond surged so strongly between them that she almost stumbled. He looked like he had not slept much either, but he was immaculately dressed in formal royal attire, his dark hair neatly brushed, his expression carefully neutral. Your Majesty, he greeted her, inclining his head in a gesture of respect between equals. Thank you for joining us. Please take your seat. He indicated the chair directly across from his at the other end of the table, the position that had traditionally been reserved for the queen consort. But Ilara noticed that someone had modified it overnight. The chair was now the same size and style as the king's throne, elevated to the same height, marking her as an equal rather than a subordinate. She sat, nodding her thanks to Matthias for the gesture. The council members took their seats around the table, and Ilara noticed several new faces mixed in with the nobles from last night. One in particular caught her attention, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and keen blue eyes, wearing robes that marked her as a scholar or advisor. Matthias noticed her gaze. Your Majesty, allow me to introduce Magistrate Helena. She is our kingdom's leading expert on constitutional law and governance. I have asked her to help us structure the framework for a joint rule, something that has never been attempted in our kingdom's history. Helena stood and bowed to both monarchs. It is an honor to serve both your majesties. I have spent the night reviewing historical precedents from other kingdoms that have attempted shared power structures. I believe I have some proposals that might work for our unique situation. Before she could continue, the doors burst open and a messenger rushed in, his face flushed and urgent. Your Majesties, forgive the interruption, but there is an emergency. Lord Goldcrest's army is marching toward our border. They will reach the frontier in 3 days. The room erupted in worried exclamations. Matthias stood, his expression grim. How many soldiers? The messenger swallowed hard. 10,000, Your Majesty. A full invasion force. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Matthias's jaw clenched, but he maintained his composure. Send word to General Blackwood. I want our forces mobilized within the hour. Every available soldier to the northern border immediately. He turned to the council. We knew this was a possibility. Goldcrest feels insulted by the broken betrothal, and they are responding with force. But we will not be intimidated. Lord Ashford stood, his expression troubled. Your Majesty, forgive me for speaking plainly, but our army numbers only 7,000. If we meet Goldcrest in open battle, we will be outnumbered and likely defeated. Perhaps we should consider negotiation. Find some way to appease Lord Goldcrest before blood is shed. Several nobles murmured agreement, fear clear on their faces. Ilara felt her wolf stir inside her, responding to the threat with instinctive aggression. She stood, and power rippled through the room, making everyone fall silent. No, she said firmly. We will not appease a man who marches an army against us because his daughter did not get the political marriage she wanted. That would set a precedent that any noble house can threaten violence to get their way. She looked around the table, meeting each council member's eyes. I understand your fear. You look at me and see a girl who was washing dishes 2 days ago, who has no military experience or strategic training. You are wondering how I could possibly help defend this kingdom against a superior force. She allowed silver light to glow beneath her skin, let her eyes flash gold. But I am not just a kitchen maid anymore. I am moon-blessed, and my ancestors commanded powers that have been lost to this world for 2 centuries. Powers that can turn the tide of any battle. Magistrate Helena leaned forward, her expression intrigued rather than afraid. What exactly can you do? Your Majesty, the histories speak of moon-blessed magic, but the specifics have been lost or deliberately obscured. Alara turned to Matthias. With your permission, Alpha King, I would like to demonstrate. It might help the Council understand what we are truly capable of. Matthias nodded immediately. Of course. Show us. Alara walked to the center of the room and closed her eyes, reaching deep inside for the power that had awakened in the temple. She felt it respond immediately, eager to be used after centuries of dormancy. When she opened her eyes, they were glowing pure silver. She raised her hands and began to speak in a language she should not know, but that flowed from her lips as naturally as breathing. Words passed down through generations of moon-blessed queens. The air in the council chamber began to shimmer. Silver light coalesced above the table, forming shapes. First, simple representations of the kingdom's borders and major cities. Then, tiny figures of soldiers, accurate enough that their unit insignias were visible. She was creating a perfect 3-dimensional map of the entire northern region, rendered in magic and light. Gasps echoed around the room as nobles realized what they were seeing. Alara gestured, and the magical map zoomed in on the border where Goldcrest's army was approaching. She could see them clearly now, their positions, their numbers, even their probable route of march. This is scrying magic, she explained, her voice echoing strangely as power flowed through her. One of the lost arts of the moon-blessed. I can see our enemies clearly, can track their movements in real time. They will not be able to surprise us or use terrain to their advantage. We will know their every move before they make it. She gestured again, and the map shifted to show the palace. I can also do this. The light concentrated around the palace walls, forming a shimmering barrier. I can create shields, protections that no normal army can. Breach. If we chose to defend rather than attack, I could protect this city and its people indefinitely. She let the map fade and turned to face the council. And that is just the beginning. My ancestors could call upon the earth itself to aid them, could command the weather, could enhance the strength and speed of allied soldiers while weakening enemies. I am still learning the full extent of what I can do, but I know this. With moon-blessed magic supporting our army, numbers become less important than strategy and morale. The room was absolutely silent. Then Lord Ashford began to clap, slowly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. Other nobles joined in until the chamber rang with applause. Matthias was staring at her with an expression that combined awe, pride, and something warmer that made the mate bond sing. Your Majesty, he said formally, though his eyes betrayed deeper emotion. I think you just answered any questions about whether moon-blessed power is merely legend. With you at our side, Goldcrest should be the ones worrying about how to defend themselves. Alara felt a flush of satisfaction, but also a twinge of concern. The power she had just displayed was intoxicating, seductive in its strength. She could see in the nobles' faces how their fear of her had transformed into something else. Respect, certainly, but also calculation. They were already thinking about how her abilities could be used, what they could accomplish with such power on their side. She needed to be careful. Power like this had probably contributed to the downfall of her ancestors, had given Aldrich Blackthorne justification for his coup by spreading fear of what moon-blessed magic could do. She would not make the same mistake. My lords and ladies, she said carefully, I want to be clear about something. This power I possess is not a weapon to be used carelessly or for conquest. It is a tool for protection, for defense of our people. I will use it to help turn back Goldcrest's invasion, but I will not use it for offensive war or to intimidate our neighbors into submission. She looked at Matthias. Any military action we take must be justified and proportionate. We defend ourselves, we protect our borders, but we do not become the aggressors. Do you agree, Alpha King? Matthias nodded firmly. Absolutely. Our goal is peace, not expansion. We will use every advantage we have to defend our kingdom, but we will also seek diplomatic solutions whenever possible. He turned to the messenger who had brought the news of Goldcrest's army. Send a message to Lord Goldcrest under flag of truce. Tell him that we acknowledge the insult caused by the broken betrothal, and we are willing to discuss reasonable compensation and to reaffirm our commitment to peaceful relations. But also make it clear that if he continues to advance his army, he will face the full might of the Northern Territories, including powers he cannot hope to match. The messenger bowed and hurried out. Matthias looked around the council table. Magistrate Helena, I want you to work with the Treasury to determine what compensation we can offer Goldcrest that would be generous enough to soothe his pride, but not so excessive that it bankrupts us or makes us look weak. Lord Ashford, coordinate with General Blackwood on deploying our forces. I want our army positioned to defend, but not to provoke. We show strength without aggression. Orders flew around the table as the Wados Council shifted into emergency session mode. Elara watched, impressed by how efficiently Matthias commanded his people, how they responded to his authority with confidence and respect. Whatever else he was a capable leader who had earned the loyalty of his subjects. Several hours later, the immediate crisis had been addressed as well as possible. The council adjourned, and nobles dispersed to handle their various assignments. Elara remained seated, suddenly exhausted. The magical demonstration had drained more energy than she had realized, and the weight of responsibility was settling heavily on her shoulders. Matthias approached once they were alone. Are you all right? You look pale. Elara waved off his concern. Just tired. Using that much magic takes effort, and I am still learning my limits. She looked up at him. Thank you for backing me in there, for supporting my position on not using the power aggressively. It would have been easy to see what I can do and immediately start planning conquest. Matthias pulled out the chair next to hers and sat, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence, but not so close as to be inappropriate. I meant what I said about ruling as partners. That means respecting your judgment and values, not just using you as a magical weapon. He paused, then added quietly, Besides, one of the things I have learned in studying those documents from the archives is that Aldrich's propaganda against your family focused heavily on painting the Moon-Blessed as power-hungry tyrants who used magic to oppress normal shifters. If we want to restore your family's reputation and unite the kingdom, we need to prove that narrative was false. We need to show that Moon-Blessed power can be used responsibly, for protection rather than domination. Elara felt a surge of appreciation for his understanding. He was thinking strategically, yes, but also ethically. You have given this a lot of thought. Matthias smiled. Slightly. I did not sleep much last night. I had time to think. The mate bond pulsed between them, warm and insistent, but neither moved to close the distance. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Matthias spoke again. There is something else we need to discuss. The joint rule structure. Magistrate Helena has some interesting proposals, but ultimately, the decision needs to come from us. How do we actually govern together? Elara considered the question. I think we need to establish clear areas of authority and decision-making. I will not simply rubber stamp your choices, but neither do we want to create a system where nothing can happen, because we are constantly deadlocked. Matthias nodded. Agreed. I was thinking perhaps we could divide responsibilities by area of expertise. I have experience with military matters, diplomatic relations, and general administration. You have the scrying ability and magical knowledge, plus you represent the moon-blessed legacy and the common people in a way I never could. We could use those strengths complementarily, rather than competitively. It was a reasonable proposal, and Alara found herself nodding. That could work. But we also need to establish that either of us can veto major decisions if we have serious concerns, and that we consult each other before taking significant action. True partnership means neither of us acts unilaterally on important matters. They spent the next hour hashing out the details of how their government would function. It was surprisingly productive, both of them willing to compromise and find common ground. By the time they finished, they had the outline of a system that might actually work. We should have Magistrate Helena formalize this into a charter, Matthias said. Make it official. Put it in writing so everyone understands how the government operates now. Alara agreed, then stood and stretched. I need food and rest. That magical display took more out of me than I care to admit. Matthias stood as well, his expression concerned. Of course. I will have a meal sent to your quarters. Is there anything else you need? She looked at him, at the genuine care in his eyes, and felt the mate bond tug at her heart. It would be so easy to let him in completely, to forgive and forget, and let the bond have its way. But she had promised herself she would not rush this, would not let chemistry override wisdom. Just rest, she said softly. Thank you for today, Matthias, for listening, for supporting my ideas, for treating me as a true partner. He smiled, and it transformed his usually serious face into something warm and approachable. You make it easy, Alara. You are everything a queen should be, and more than I had any right to hope for in a mate. The word mate hung in the air between them, loaded with implications and unspoken longing. Alara felt her breath catch but forced herself to maintain distance. Good night, Matthias. She turned and left before she could change her mind, feeling his eyes on her back as she walked away. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Messengers went back and forth between the palace and Goldcrest's advancing army. Matthias's offer of compensation and continued alliance was met with derision. Lord Goldcrest sent back a demand: return his daughter to her rightful position as future queen, or face the consequences of war. Matthias refused, and the kingdom prepared for battle. Alara spent hours, each day in the war room, using her scrying magic to track enemy movements and help the generals plan defensive strategies. She also worked with a small group of scholars who had been quietly studying moon-blessed history, learning from them while also teaching them what she instinctively understood about her magic. In the evenings, she and Matthias would meet to discuss the day's events, to coordinate their responses to the crisis, and gradually, almost without realizing it, to simply talk. They spoke about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Matthias told her about the pressure of being raised as the future king, about the weight of expectation that had shaped his entire life. Alara told him about the loneliness of being invisible, about the ache of always being on the outside looking in. With each conversation, the walls between them lowered slightly. The mate bond grew stronger, fed by understanding and shared purpose. Alara found herself looking forward to their evening meetings, found her heart lifting when she heard his voice or caught his scent in the corridor. She was falling for him, she realized. Not because of the mate bond, though that certainly played a role, but because of who he was. The man who had knelt before her and acknowledged injustice. The man who listened to her ideas with genuine interest. The man who made her laugh with dry humor during tense war councils. The man who looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. On the 5th day after Goldcrest's army began its march, scouts reported that they were 1 day from the border. Tomorrow, there would be battle unless a miracle occurred. That night, Alara could not sleep. She stood on her balcony looking out at the moon, seeking guidance, seeking strength. A soft knock at her door made her turn. When she opened it, Matthias stood there, looking as restless as she felt. I could not sleep, he said simply. I thought perhaps you might want company, or perhaps I just needed to see you before tomorrow." Elara stepped back, allowing him to enter. They stood in her sitting room, the space between them charged with unspoken emotion. "Are you afraid?" she asked quietly. Matthias considered the question. "Not for myself, but I am afraid for our people, for the soldiers who will fight tomorrow. I am afraid that my choice to honor you instead of the treaty will cost lives. And I am afraid that I might lose you before we even have a chance to explore what we could be together." He took a step closer. "I know I said I would give you time, that I would not push, and I will keep that promise. But I need you to know something before we go into battle tomorrow. If I fall, if I do not survive, I need you to know that I do not regret rejecting Vivian. I do not regret recognizing you as my equal and my queen. And most of all, I do not regret the night we ran together beneath the moon, because for those few hours, I felt more complete than I ever have in my life." Elara felt tears gathering. "Do not talk about dying. We are going to win tomorrow. I will use every ounce of power I have to protect our soldiers and defeat Goldcrest's army." Matthias smiled sadly. "I believe you, but war is unpredictable, and I would rather say this now than leave it unsaid." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face gently. "I love you, Elara Sylvanas. I have loved you from the moment the mate bond snapped into place. And I will love you until the day I die, whether that is tomorrow or 50 years from now. You do not have to say it back. You do not have to forgive me or accept me. I just needed you to know." Then he leaned in and pressed the softest, most reverent kiss to her forehead. The touch sent electricity through her entire body, the mate bond surging with such intensity that she gasped. When he pulled back, his eyes were glowing golden, his wolf barely contained. "Good night, my queen," he whispered. "May the moon goddess protect you tomorrow." He turned to leave, but Elara's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist. She could not let him leave, could not let him walk away thinking his love was unreturned, that he might die tomorrow without knowing how she felt. "Matthias, wait." He turned, hope and uncertainty warring in his expression. Elara took a deep breath and let her heart speak the truth she had been trying to deny. "I love you too. I did not want to. I fought against it. I told myself it was just the mate bond, just chemistry and biology and fate forcing us together. But it is more than that. You have shown me who you are through your actions, through your willingness to admit when you are wrong, through the way you treat me as an equal even when it would be easier not to. I love you, Matthias Blackthorn, and I do not want to wait anymore." She pulled him closer, rising on her toes to eliminate the height difference between them. "Make love to me tonight. Let us have this, in case tomorrow takes it away from us." Matthias's eyes widened. "Elara, are you sure? I do not want you to feel pressured or to regret this later." She smiled through her tears. "I am absolutely sure. I want to complete the mate bond. I want to be yours and have you be mine, in every way that matters. No more waiting. No more holding back." That was all the encouragement Matthias needed. He swept her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that took her breath away. The mate bond exploded. Between them, finally allowed to fulfill its purpose, and Elara felt like she was drowning in sensation and emotion. They moved to the bed without breaking the kiss, hands exploring, clothes falling away. When they finally came together, when the bond completed and locked into place with a flash of golden and silver light, Elara felt whole in a way she had never experienced. This was what she had been missing her entire life. Not just physical pleasure, though that was overwhelming, but the deep, soul-level connection that came from being with your true mate. They lay tangled together afterward, both breathing hard, the bond now fully formed and unbreakable between them. Matthias held her close, pressing kisses to her hair, her forehead, anywhere he could reach. "I will protect you tomorrow," he murmured. I will do everything in my power to make sure we both survive this war and get to build a life together. Alara snuggled closer to his warmth. We will protect each other. That is what mates do. And we will protect our kingdom, our people, together. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the mate bond singing contentedly, now that it was finally complete. When dawn came, they woke to the sound of war horns. Goldcrest's army had reached the border. Alara and Matthias dressed in silence, both preparing mentally for what was to come. Before they left the room, Matthias pulled her close one more time. Whatever happens today, I want you to know that last night was the best night of my life. Alara kissed him fiercely. Then we will have to make sure we both survive so we can have many more nights like it. They walked to the war room together, and when they entered hand in hand, the assembled generals and nobles noticed immediately. The completed mate bond was visible to any shifter who looked closely, a golden thread connecting them that pulsed with power. Captain Daniel smiled broadly. It is about time, your majesties. Now we have even more reason to win this battle. The kingdom finally has its true king and queen, united as they should be. General Blackwood approached with maps and reports. Goldcrest's forces are here. He pointed to a valley near the border. They are set up in a defensive position, waiting for us to come to them. Standard military strategy would say we should not give them what they want, but we also cannot let them simply sit on our border indefinitely. Alara stepped forward to examine the map, then closed her eyes and activated her scrying magic. The silver light filled the room again, showing Goldcrest's exact positions in three-dimensional detail. They have made a mistake, she said slowly, studying the magical display. They are in the valley thinking it protects their flanks, but they have not accounted for my abilities. I can use the earth itself to trap them, turn their defensive position into a prison. She looked at Matthias. If I do this, if I use my power this way, there will be casualties. Men will die. Are we prepared for that? Matthias's expression was grim, but determined. We gave them every chance to negotiate. They chose war. We will do what we must to protect our kingdom, but we will also offer mercy to any who surrender. He turned to General Blackwood. Prepare the army to march, but also prepare white flags and have heralds ready to offer terms of surrender once we have demonstrated what we are capable of. The army assembled within hours, 7,000 soldiers ready to defend their homeland. Alara rode at the front beside Matthias, both in their ceremonial armor, the sight of their united presence inspiring the troops. They reached the battlefield by midday. Goldcrest's forces were arrayed across the valley, as the scrying had shown, a massive force of 10,000 soldiers in perfect formation. At their head was Lord Goldcrest himself, the imposing man in his 50s with iron-gray hair and cold eyes. Beside him sat Vivienne, dressed in armor as well, her face twisted with hatred as she spotted Alara. Matthias rode forward under a white flag, Alara at his side. They stopped within shouting distance of Goldcrest's line. "Lord Goldcrest!" Matthias called out. "I ask you one final time to turn back. We do not want bloodshed. We have offered fair compensation for the broken betrothal. Accept it and go in peace." Goldcrest laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "You think I will accept money in place of my daughter's crown? You insult me, boy. My daughter was promised to be queen, and she will be queen, either through marriage or through conquest. Surrender now, and perhaps I will let you live as my vassal." Vivian's voice rang out, shrill with fury. "And as for that kitchen maid playing at royalty beside you, when we win, I will personally see to it that she returns to scrubbing floors where she belongs. If I am feeling merciful." Alara felt her wolf surge with rage at the insult, but she kept her voice calm. "You should not have come here, Lord Goldcrest. You should have listened when we offered peace. Now you will see why the moon-blessed were feared and respected for 1,000 years." She dismounted from her horse and walked forward several paces, then knelt, and placed both hands on the ground. Power flowed from her in waves, silver light racing outward from where she touched the earth. The ground beneath Goldcrest's army began to tremble. Soldiers cried out in alarm as the valley walls on either side began to move, the earth itself reshaping according to Alara's will. Walls of stone rose up, blocking the exits from the valley, trapping Goldcrest's army inside. Goldcrest's eyes widened in shock and fear. What is this? What witchcraft is this? Alara stood, her eyes glowing pure silver, her voice carrying across the valley with supernatural clarity. This is the power of the Moon Blessed. The power that your Aldrich Blackthorn murdered my family to eliminate because he feared what we could do. This is why you cannot win. This is why you should have accepted peace when it was offered. She raised her hands, and the earth walls grew higher, 30 feet tall now, completely enclosing Goldcrest's army. I could crush you all right now. I could bring these walls down on your heads, or open the earth beneath your feet. But I am not my ancestors' murderer. I will give you one chance to surrender. Lay down your arms, and you will be allowed to return home safely. Refuse, and I will show you the full extent of what Moon-blessed magic can do. The Goldcrest soldiers looked to their lord, fear clear on their faces. They were trapped, surrounded by impossible magic, facing powers they could not hope to fight. Many were already dropping their weapons. But Lord Goldcrest's face was purple with rage. This is exactly why the Moon-blessed had to be eliminated. You are monsters, wielding unnatural power, forcing others to submit through fear. Aldrich Blackthorn was right to overthrow you. He drew his sword and charged toward Alara, clearly intending to cut her down before she could do more damage. But he had forgotten about Matthias. The Alpha King shifted mid-leap, his massive black wolf intercepting Goldcrest and bearing him to the ground. They struggled for a moment before Matthias pinned the older man, teeth at his throat. Yield, Matthias growled, his voice distorted by his wolf form. Yield, or I end this now. For a long moment, Goldcrest struggled. Then finally, he went limp in submission. I yield. Call off your mate and her magic. Matthias shifted back to human form and stood, leaving Goldcrest gasping in the dirt. Your army will surrender and return to Goldcrest territory immediately. You will sign a treaty acknowledging the Moon-blessed claim to the throne and swearing to never threaten the Northern Territories again. In return, we will allow you to leave with your lives, and we will still provide the compensation we originally offered. Do you accept these terms? Goldcrest slowly climbed to his feet, all the fight gone from him. He looked around at his trapped army, at the impossible walls of earth surrounding them, at Alara standing tall with power radiating from her very skin. He had been utterly defeated without a single casualty on either side. I accept, he said hoarsely. We will withdraw. Vivian let out a shriek of fury and spurred her horse toward Alara, a dagger in her hand. But Alara simply raised one hand, and vines erupted from the ground, wrapping around Vivian's horse and pulling both rider and mount to a gentle stop. No, Alara said firmly. Enough. Your father has surrendered. Accept it with grace, or I will have you escorted from the kingdom in chains. Vivian struggled against the vines but could not break free. Finally, she slumped in defeat, tears of humiliation streaming down her face. I hate you, she whispered. I will always hate you. Alara felt pity for the woman who had been promised everything and had it snatched away. I am sorry you feel that way, but hatred will only poison you. Let it go, Vivian. Find happiness elsewhere. There is someone out there who is meant to be your mate, who will love you for who you are, rather than what throne you can bring them. Go find that person instead of clinging to someone who was never truly yours. The vines released Vivian, and she rode back to her father's side in silence. Over the next several hours, the Goldcrest army disarmed and withdrew. Alara lowered the earth walls once they were gone, restoring the valley to its natural state. The Northern Territories' army cheered their victory, celebrating that they had won without losing a single soldier. That night, there was a feast in the palace to celebrate. Nobles who had been uncertain about Alara's claim now proclaimed her the greatest queen in history. Common people flooded the streets, celebrating the return of moon-blessed magic and the unity of their rulers. Alara and Matthias sat side by side at the high table, their hands intertwined, the mate bond visible to all. Marcus was there, weak but smiling, proud to see the girl he had protected finally claiming her destiny. When the formal part of the feast ended, Matthias stood and raised his glass. "My lords and ladies, people of the Northern Territories, today we witnessed something unprecedented. We defended our kingdom without shedding blood. We demonstrated the power of moon-blessed magic without using it for conquest or cruelty. This is the beginning of a new era for our kingdom, an era where the mistakes of the past are acknowledged and corrected, where justice is balanced with mercy." He turned to Alara. "I stand before you a man who made a terrible mistake. I rejected my true mate because I thought duty demanded it. But I have learned that true duty is not about blindly following tradition or honoring agreements made in bad faith. True duty is about doing what is right, even when it is difficult." He went down on one knee, and the hall fell silent. "Alara Sylvanus, moon-blessed heir, rightful queen of the Northern Territories, and the other half of my soul, I kneel before you not as a king to a subject, but as a man to the woman he loves. I ask not for your forgiveness, because I know I do not deserve it, but for your partnership, your trust, and your hand in marriage. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife, not to legitimize my claim to the throne, but to unite us as we were always meant to be?" Alara felt tears streaming down her face as the entire hall waited for her answer. She looked at this man who had rejected her and then spent every day since proving he was worthy of a second chance. She thought about the journey that had brought her from invisible servant to powerful queen, about the family she had lost and the legacy she was reclaiming. And she thought about the future they could build together, a kingdom where moon-blessed magic and Blackthorn leadership combined to create something better than either dynasty had achieved alone. "Yes," she said clearly, her voice ringing through the hall. "I will marry you, Matthias Blackthorn. I will stand beside you as your wife and your equal, and together we will build a kingdom that honors both our families' legacies while creating something new and better." The hall erupted in cheers as Matthias stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply while their subjects celebrated. It was a kiss that promised forever, that sealed a bond already unbreakable, that marked the true beginning of their reign together. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? Months later, Alara stood in the same temple ruins where she had first awakened her power. But now, instead of crumbling and forgotten, the temple had been restored. Stone had been repaired, carvings cleaned and preserved. The altar where Queen Seraphina had died now, honored as a sacred memorial. Today was her wedding day, and she had insisted on holding the ceremony here, in this place where everything had changed. Matthias waited for her at the altar, handsome in his ceremonial robes, his eyes full of love and wonder as she walked toward him in a gown of white silk, embroidered with silver moon phases. Marcus was there, frail but alive, having held on long enough to see this day. Captain Daniel stood as witness, along with dozens of moon-blessed loyalists, who had come out of hiding once it was safe to reveal themselves. The ceremony was conducted by a priestess who had studied the old ways in secret, preserving the moon-blessed traditions through generations of suppression. As Alara and Matthias exchanged vows under the full moon, silver and gold light swirled around them, the magic of the moon blessing their union. When they kissed as husband and wife, the light exploded outward, washing over everyone present and filling them with a sense of peace and rightness. The prophecy had been fulfilled. The lost princess had awakened and claimed her crown. The usurper's descendant had acknowledged the crime and made restitution. and from the ashes of old injustice, something beautiful and new had been born. As they walked from the temple hand in hand, Alara looked up at the moon and felt the presence of all the queens who had come before her. They were at peace now, their legacy secured, their magic restored to the world. And ahead lay a lifetime of ruling together, of building a kingdom where power was tempered by wisdom, where strength was balanced by mercy, and where two people who should have been enemies had instead become the greatest love story their world had ever known. The Alpha King had found the crown she never claimed, and had understood her blood was royal, and in understanding that, in honoring it, he had found not just a queen, but his mate, his equal, and his forever.